Hey guys, it's Rose's Randoms, and we are gathered here today to talk about the show Cassandra. So I'm really excited to talk about the show. I really enjoyed this show. So yeah, we're gonna go right into it. So Cassandra is a German show, and it's on Netflix, and pretty much it's about this family who moves in to this smart house, and then things start happening. Sinister things start happening that have to do with the technology behind the smart house. So in episode 1, we open up with this woman. There's a man driving down the road, and then there's a woman who is in he spots a woman in a car crash, and she's in the back seat and she's holding a baby, and she gets out and she's saying they're dead, and then she points to this thing and she's like, it's her. And as the camera pans, we see this robot standing there, and we're like, okay. Immediately I'm like, okay, so this robot is going to be the robot that is somehow in charge of this smart house that this family is supposed to move into. So decades later, because this takes place in the 70s and this show is supposed to be in the present, I'm assuming 2024, 2025. So decades later, we see we see this family move in to the house, and it consists of a mom and a dad who is, the mom is Samira, often called Sam. The dad is named David, the son Finn, and the daughter Juno. So immediately, one of the things that I liked about this, that I noticed, is that they didn't make the siblings, the son and the daughter, like hate each other. Because usually when you see like these shows that have like siblings who are like, which one is a boy, one is a girl, oftentimes they show them very much at odds, not getting along at all. And even though we see little, like maybe one thing where like, the son is like yelling at his sister to get out of his room, he's upset, and that's really the only time. Every other time they show them, they get along really well. So I appreciated that. So anyways, they move into this house, and immediately, like, they're seeing all these TV screens around the house, but they're like shut off. And so the kids ask, they're like, oh, like, why are there TV screens all around the house? And the dad says that, oh, this was like one of the first smart houses. It was built in the early 1970s. And so it's just like, I don't know. I don't know if I would want to live in a smart house from the 1970s. I feel like there's like a lot of malfunctions with that, So like, I don't know. Like, unless you're like, oh, everything has been dismantled, I don't want to live in that house. So that's number one. Also, we find out that the reason that they moved is because where they were originally living in Hamburg, Germany, the daughter Juno, who is young, she's in elementary school, I believe. The son is, I think, in high school. She found her aunt, who unalived herself, and they are moving for a fresh start. So the aunt is actually the mother's sister, who we also find out has been struggling with, I'm not sure, it's not clear throughout the show, but it seems like she was struggling with some kind of, maybe some type of mental illness, and then maybe she was like also not taking her medication. And so obviously there was that struggle there. So the mother and the son, Sam and Finn, they are looking around the house, and Sam is like, oh, this run room is going to be my art room. And so Finn is in there with her, and he sees this thing covered up with a sheet, and he's like, what's that? So he goes and uncovers it, and we see the robot from the opening of the episode. And so we know, oh Lord, here we go. And so his bright self, he takes the robot and like tries to get it to like work and stuff. Also, before that, he goes in down into the basement and he sees like a bunch of like this huge like technology thing. It's clearly like circuits and stuff like that that is obviously meant to like turn on the smart house. So anyways, he goes and he works on this robot with his sister, but to no avail, right? It does not turn on. However, later that night, while everyone is sleeping, this robot turns on and we see that it has this woman's face, and this robot starts to roam around the house while everybody is sleeping. And we see that she can, control the doors and stuff, because if their clothes are locked, like it's red, and then like it turns green when she like wants to open something or go through it. So she roams around the house and eventually she goes into little Juno's room. And she decides to stay there and stand there over Juno. And then Juno does this big screaming and yelling, which wakes up everyone and causes everyone to run into her room. Then a few seconds later, we see that they're pretty much deciding whether or not they should keep this robot on. And the robot, her name we find out is Cassandra. She's like, oh, I am supposed to be helping you with everything around the house. That's my duty to this family, blah, blah, blah. And immediately I'm going to be like, yo, got a robot roaming around the house, talking to me like they know me. This robot is getting turned off and thrown out in the trash, because absolutely not. Like, we're not going to have that. We're not going to have that. So Samira doesn't really seem too much for it, but Juno is all like, please, please. And I'm just like, girl, you were just yelling and screaming and crying over this damn robot. Now you wanted to stay. Ain't no way me as a child would have been like, let's keep the robot. Like, especially after it done scared me. But okay, so anyway, Samira is also she's against this, but then David is like, oh my God, yeah, we should keep the robot, especially when he sees that his daughter wants to keep the robot around. And so they decide to keep the robot on. So the next morning, Cassandra, so not all the TVs are on, right? Because like they've chosen to keep her on. And so all the TVs are on, and she wakes them up with this very annoying Good Morning German song. And you realize throughout the show, she continuously sings this song to wake them up. And honestly, the first day she would have woken me up with this song, I would have been like, shut off, please. Cassandra, shut off. Cassandra, can you please stop singing that song at the very least? But nobody says anything, and nobody finds this weird. Like, I guess they think that that's just like what the house does, but like I would be finding that a little strange. But it's a show, so we press on. So later on, we see that Cassandra is outside with Juno bearing a rodent. Oh, because by the way, while she was roaming around the house when she first woke up, she intentionally rolled over a rodent that was in their house. And so she's now with Juno, who's burying this rodent. And so the parents are watching, and they're talking about like, oh, do you think that this is good for Juno? And I'm sitting here like, no, this is not good for Juno, because clearly Juno has some type of PTSD from seeing discovering her aunt. And also, like, it's clear that Juno probably has some type of issues, like, maybe with making friends. At least it's insinuated the way that they are talking. So it's like, no, this robot is not good for Juno. I don't even know why this is a question. But anywho, while they're watching and talking, we see that Cassandra is speaking to Juno. And she's talking to Juno about her aunt. And Juno tells her, like, my aunt is not alive. And then, like, I guess she kind of, like, somehow insinuates to Cassandra what happened to her aunt, because Cassandra is like, oh, I'm sorry that your aunt was weak. And Juno's like, my aunt wasn't weak. And Cassandra's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, she wasn't weak. Like, I'm like, yo, again, as a child talking to this robot while I'm bearing a rodent, and you gonna talk about my aunt who I loved after what I just went through, I would be running back into that house. Cassandra said this, please turn Cassandra off. But again, we don't ever go there. We don't. So we press on. So later that morning, the mom is seeing off her kids and their husband as the husband is taking the kids to school. Background, she is a painter slash sculptor, I believe, and the husband is a famous book writer. And so, they get in the car and they drive off. And when Sam turns around, she sees Cassandra right in her face. And Cassandra's head is like, her like robot head is like stretched up like over Sam. And Sam turns around and she's like, yo, like, were you always this tall? And this robot says to her, I was trying to see the kids off, but your broad head was in the way. Oh my God, when I first watched that, I replayed it like twice because I'm like, did she really say her broad head was in the way? Like, I know this is in German, and so maybe the translation is not exactly the same, but I found that hilarious. So again, this robot says this to me, I would be like, excuse me, and turn her off with a quickness. But Cassandra doesn't do that. Sorry, not Cassandra. Sam doesn't do that. She just walks around her and walks off. So later on that day, because they have like this big pool, swimming pool inside the house, which is like on the second floor or something. And so Sam is in the swimming pool. And remember, that TV screen that has Cassandra's face on it, Cassandra can talk through this TV screen. And this TV screen is like in every single room of the house, including this swimming pool room that Sam is in right now. And so while Sam is in this pool, there's this huge glass window and Cassandra is outside mowing the lawn. So remember that rodent that they were burying earlier that day? They had put like a little rock as a headstone over like the rodent's grave. And as Cassandra is mowing the lawn, she runs over the rock. And this is when Sam is getting out of the pool and the rock smashes through the glass and hits Sam in the back. And so obviously this is extremely painful. And so Cassandra is on the smart screen like, oh, do you need me to call 911? Are you okay? And then she starts calling 911. And Sam is like, no, don't call 911. Cassandra, stop calling 911. And Cassandra's like, oh, okay. And obviously, like, Cassandra is all seeing and all knowing. So she knows Sam was in that pool. And she did that on purpose. So obviously, we sense some jealousy coming on. Clearly, she wants to get rid of Sam. Like immediately when she said what she said to Sam, I knew like at the beginning when she would call her like her broad head, I knew that this robot and Sam were gonna be at odds. And so at first I thought that Cassandra did this on purpose, like of her own accord. But we do find out that when Sam is with her husband in the car, she asked, did you ask Cassandra to mow the lawn? And he said yes. And so we know that Cassandra did not mow the lawn of her own volition. However, she probably saw an opportunity to hurt Sam and did so. So now the kids are at school. We see Finn at school and he meets this boy and his name is Steve. And Steve seems to be like this class clown type and whatever. And he immediately, gets along with Steve. And the teacher asks Steve to update Finn on everything that they've been learning. And so Steve is like, we're not doing this in the library. Where do you live? And so Finn invites him over to his house and they go to his house. And they discover a few things about the house. They discover this like door that was in the basement. and it's kind of like this bar slash party room. It's not really of huge significance, but that's what they discover. And then the two of them almost have a moment. And so this is obviously where we find out that Finn is gay and his parents know he's gay, but Steve is also gay, but struggling, I guess, to find out if he really is. And obviously his parents don't know. And this kind of continues throughout the show. So we also see Cassandra go into Juno's room, right? And they're like singing together and stuff. And so this sparks something in Juno. So at dinner, Juno tells her parents like, oh, like I want to join the singing club or whatever club it is at school. And so Sam is like, oh, do you really want to do that? Are you ready for that? Blah, blah, blah. And so Juno gets extremely upset about this, and she goes to her room and starts crying about it. And I'm like, I get that you're worried about your kid because everything that she went through, but why are we trying to discourage our children from joining a club at school that can possibly help her get out of her shell or like help her get through trauma? Like, that was a little weird. But anyway, she goes to Juno's room and she comforts Juno. And she's like, oh, we'll be at everything. We'll be at all your concerts, front and center. And I'm like, lady, that's what you should have said from the beginning. I don't know why you had to say what you said at the dinner table. That was so unnecessary. But we press on. Also, this is the first revelation that David kind of seems like a little bit of a jerk, because at some point he and Sam are talking, and I'm guessing that Juno used to be some type of prima ballerina or something, and he makes a comment about Juno's weight. He's like, oh, like all those girls are like super skinny, and Juno isn't Juno, and like he kind of hesitates to say whatever. And then Sam is like, Juno is not fat, right? And then he kind of drops it. But it's like, also like this little girl, like she's not skinny, but she's also not chubby. Like she's a normal little girl. So it was like so strange, that little instance. But that's like the first kind of instance that it's like, oh, okay, like David's kind of a jerk. And he continues to get on my nerves throughout the show, just to let you know. So later that night, Sam is doing some cleaning and she finds this box. Of course, as they all do, they find a box when they're in this old house, or they're not really looking for anything. And it's like some reels or a tape or whatever. It's like to put inside a projector. And so there's a projector in the living space area, and she goes and she puts it inside the projector. And as she's watching it, she sees photos go by, and then eventually she starts seeing photos of Cassandra, and then Cassandra with a man, and then Cassandra with a little boy. And so she asks Cassandra like, hey, is this you? And Cassandra's just looking at the screen, and she looks like she's almost about to cry, but she doesn't. And she doesn't answer Sam's questions. And so Sam just continues to watch this, and she's like, oh, okay, this is really weird, So Sam eventually, she lets it go. She goes upstairs to bed. And then this is when we get a little perspective from Cass, and it's of her walking around inside the same house, and she goes on the couch and she sits in between a man who we can assume is her husband and a boy about in his teenage years who we can assume is her son. So this is where we get the gist that Cassandra was a real person at some point with a son and a husband, and she doesn't look upset when she sits down, but she also doesn't look super happy, right? It looks like something is afoot with this family. So we go back to the present time, and Cassandra does something to the projector, and it causes the projector to catch on fire, which I am certain, if Cassandra doesn't blame Sam for this, Sam is going to get blamed for this by her husband, David, because he is a jerk. And so that is where we end episode 1. And I was just like, okay, good start to show. We know where this is going to go. So yeah, that was episode 1 of Cassandra. Y'all, let me know if you've watched this show and what you thought about episode 1, if you have watched it. And based on this review of this episode, will you watch it? So yeah, guys, that was it for this video. I will be continuing to review the rest of the episodes in each video. I believe there were 8. So yeah, if you like this video, give it a like and make sure you comment down below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and share this video. Bye, guys.